like diamonds, and they didn't walk, they just floated, and they went over to my mom's bed, and they just stood there, just looking at her. And I had the feeling that they wanted to take her. Did you see what was outside last night? And she said it was a big black serpent flying in the air. And I thought, oh crap, what did I do? And then it spoke. It said something really interesting. It was, the matrix is the same on both sides. This big dog-looking raccoon thing, and just disappeared, really sick. And she thought that there was maybe some kind of curse that had been placed on us. And her mom just realized, this is not brother. This is not good. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Eddie Cordova. I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist and origin hypnosis specialist. And I help everyone from, sleep issues, anxiety, to past life regression and alien abduction regression. And I kind of just want to talk about what led me to do that kind of work. And, it all started in a kind of mundane way. I was about 5 years old. I went to school outside of the district because the place that I went to was a daycare, and my mom had to work late, so it was a daycare right next to an elementary, and they took care of me there and that kind of thing. So we used to get up pretty early, like 5 a.m. So I was just sitting on my bed, and she gave me one task: put on your socks. And so I'm sitting there, my socks are on the ground, and I'm just tired, really, really tired. And I'm looking at my socks, and then all of a sudden one of them is just gone. It was there, and then it wasn't, and I was looking right at it when it happened. And it didn't look like it bleeped, or there wasn't any light or any effect. It was kind of like watching one of those old Bewitched shows where she wiggles her nose and then the thing is gone. And so the sock was gone, and she came over and she said, "Where's your sock?" And I just said, "It's gone." And I didn't explain further because I didn't know how to explain that kind of thing. That was the first thing that happened. And it was in the same location, which was this big old apartment complex near Belmont High School, if you're familiar with LA. What happened in '88 was, it happened during a hard time. So the relationship between my mom and my dad, it wasn't good. There was a lot of there was some infidelity, and he was very violent towards her, and I got to see all that. So it was, I wasn't in a good state. But in the middle of the night, I woke up, and I was in bed, and I looked to my left. There was a couch, and this was a really small apartment, so my mom's bed was directly behind me in a parallel way. And I looked over to the couch, and there was this little being. It was all shadow. It had no face, no anything. It was just really short, about 3 feet tall. And it was in a kind of prone position. It was like sneaking. And it was just on the couch looking around, and this thing, it was a shadow, but the thing is that the room was dark, and it was darker. So it was like darker than the darkness. So it was like void, just dark. And it went over to the other side of the couch, and it got on one of the arms, and it took a little leap, and it started flying around the ceiling, like from corner to corner. And I'm just looking at this thing like, what's happening? And it was kind of flat, like the dimension on it. Once it was on the ceiling, it was flat, and it just kept going over and over each corner. And I was really afraid. And what I did is I put my hands together to form a little gun, and I thought, I'm going to take a shot at this. I know I don't have a real gun, but I aim at it and I wait for it to come over my bed. And when I do, I take my shot, and a little circle, a dark circle, opens up right above my bed, and it just zips right in there. And I was like, I killed it. It's gone. But then what happened was another one of those dark circles appeared over the couch, and 3 more fell out. and they were all doing the same thing. And, I didn't have a word for the word portal at that time. It was 88, and I'm sure it was somewhere in the ether, but I hadn't been introduced to it, and I just called it a black hole. It was about the size of a frisbee, and I remembered that. The size of it was important, and I later saw that somewhere else, but, I heard the size of this thing in another story. They kept coming out, and they were doing the same thing. Each one would take turns, going around the room once or twice, and then it would zip right into the hole, and another one would come out, and they had like this thing going, and they knew I was there, but they didn't really care. They were just really immersed in what they were doing, and they looked towards my way, and they were just kind of like these little creatures, and they had these little almost like webbed wings underneath their arms. And after a while, I noticed, okay, they're not breaking their line formation. They stay in line, they take turns, and I thought, that's just like playing a game at school, like playing handball or something. And then I felt positive about it, and I said, well, they're just playing. They don't care about me. They're playing. Obviously, they're in mine. They're having fun. Then I just fell asleep because it wasn't scary anymore. It was a game. I kind of just left that alone. And about a week after that, something else happened that was, to me, far more terrifying. My bed to the right was a door that led out to the apartment complex, and in the middle of the night, the door lit up like a bike reflector, or like if you can imagine water and diamonds. It lit up, and out of the door came these really, really tall beings. The thing that I never realized till I'm saying this now is that they were taller than the door, which was, how do you come in through the door if, without crouching in? And they didn't crouch in, they just kind of came out, and they were much taller than the door, and they were about 8 feet tall or something. And these beings were made of light. They were made of this light, and they were floating. There was 3 of them. The 2 on the ends were really tall, and the one in the middle was a little shorter, but still very tall. And I had the intuition that the one in the middle was a woman. I don't know why, because they didn't really have any kind of characteristics that I would be able to distinguish, but it had no face. It was just all like bike reflector, like light, like diamonds, and they didn't walk, they just floated. And they went over to my mom's bed, and they just stood there, just looking at her. And I had the feeling that they wanted to take her. And it was just very, very terrifying to me. And I felt like they could feel my fear. And after a while, they just went right back, floated back through the door. It zipped back to normal. And that was the end of that experience. But it left me really, really kind of filled with anxiety. Like I'd still feel it every day, and I'd get really sick. And my mom would take me to school, and I just had this tightness in my stomach, and I would throw up like almost every day. And she didn't know what was going on, so she'd take me to doctors, and they'd say there's nothing wrong with him. We don't know what's going on with him. And it could have been that some of the trauma of seeing just the violence at home, but that wasn't what was on my mind. I didn't really think about that. It's like what was on my mind was those beings coming and trying to take her, or just seeing this kind of thing that was just so strange. And she ended up seeing something herself in the place, and she says I would grind my teeth a lot at night when I was sleeping. It was just like this grinding, and she had to wake me up. Well, one of the times that I was grinding my teeth, she got up, and there was this big dog-looking raccoon thing. She said it was a raccoon because of the hands, and it walked right across her feet and went into the kitchen and just disappeared. And we lived on the 3rd floor, There was no way there was going to be a raccoon in there. And she said it was just really dark, shadowy, and it was gone. But she ended up taking me to what we call a vidente, which is like translated like a seer. And she didn't know what I had seen. I didn't tell her. And I don't know why I didn't tell her. I just didn't. I was just really sick, and she thought that there was maybe some kind of curse that had been placed on us. And we went to see this vidente, and he said, don't worry about it. The beings that he's seeing, these light beings, he said they're ancestors, and they're there to take care of you. And maybe later he's going to be able to see more, but it'll stop. And he gave us an egg, and he said, put this under the bed, crack it, put it under the bed, and leave it there overnight, and things will stop. And that's what we did, and they did, and things got better from there. And that's kind of what always led me to kind of delve into these mysteries. And I got really interested in things like UFOs and aliens and that kind of thing. And it was just, this was in the 80s, so we had a lot of TV shows, Unsolved Mysteries and that kind of thing. And I was always just really, really fascinated by the whole alien thing. And, then I got into music, I got into video games and all this other kind of thing. And I started getting into relationships, and those didn't go so well. I had a lot of pent up anger and a lot of sadness in me. And it was just, every relationship would just fall apart. And about in 2013 or so, I started getting into meditation as a way to kind of calm myself. And I didn't want to be the way I wanted that I was, but I didn't even know that it was related to what had happened. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm mad at you, Dad, or anything, because he didn't leave. They did split up, but he would come around, and I had a relationship with him, and I didn't hold it against him or anything. So I took it upon myself. I'm gonna do what you couldn't. I'm gonna calm this, whatever it is that's within me. I'm gonna calm it. And I got into meditation, and I started doing, different techniques, and it worked. It was able to calm me, and I had really wonderful experiences with it. And the paranormal just kind of died out. It just didn't come back until I started the meditation. I was in a different location now. This place was in Lincoln Heights. And one night, I was on my phone. I was looking through pictures, and in the corner of the room, there was a flash of just this green light. And I was like, what was that? My phone immediately turned off, and I got it back on. All the pictures were wiped. And I went over to the other room, and I told my mom, are you using some kind of light in here? And she was just asleep. She's like, what are you talking about? And so I left it at that. And in the morning, she comes to me, and she's like, I saw the light. It was this big green thing over the cabinet. And, I put that memory card into a computer, and the thing was corrupted. Like, it was just done. There was nothing to recover. It was corrupted. And that was the first thing that happened in this location. And, as I went through with my meditation, I ended up kind of fusing the paranormal into it. Like, okay, so I'm seeing some pretty crazy things in meditation. And I got into something called hemisync, which is a kind of out-of-body experience type of thing. And, I did it for about a year, and it was, to me, very calming. And I didn't get too much of the out-of-body stuff going on. And I started getting into philosophy, like the philosophy of Watts and that kind of thing, and Terence McKenna. And I started hearing about, psilocybin and this kind of thing. And At that point, I was about, I'd say about 30, and I had never touched any kind of psychedelics. I had never had a beer or anything. It was just, my mom always raised me to stay away from all drugs. And her example was look outside the window. And where we lived near Belmont High School, it was gang territory. I saw people die like all the time. It was just one time I saw two cars in the middle of the street shooting at each other. And it was two rival gangs that I won't mention here, but they were just going at it. And I saw this great artist that did some murals in the community, just OD, right next to his damn mural. So I stayed away from all that stuff. But what was being said about psilocybin, it was like, okay, it opens portals, it takes you to another world. So I decided, okay, I'm going to try this, but I don't want to go in full on just like that. So how about an edible, marijuana edible? And so I did that, and I fused it together with the meditation and the hemisync that I was doing. That was something else. Like, I actually felt like I came out of my body and I shot through space, and this was so real. But it was interesting because the process of I could see every part of the process. It was like, okay, first you start seeing intense visuals, like up here, and they descend. They come into around here, and then after that, they're right behind your eyelids, and then you're in them. And so it was like the dream becomes reality, and then you go into the dream. And, I shot into space and I saw a being of energy, and she was dancing, swirling, and she made a planet with her dance. And then she turned into like this butterfly and just flew into the planet, and with every flap, just life, flowers, trees, all this kind of stuff would just come up. And then my vision kind of zoomed out, and space was just full of these beings just dancing. And then it spoke. It said something really interesting. It was, the matrix is the same on both sides. The dream dreams reality, and reality dreams dream. Love, sound, dream, one. And then it showed me how I was able to create the room that I was in using this energy. And I came out of that, and it was really messed up because I went to work the next day, and I worked at a very popular big record store in Hollywood. And I was looking around thinking everything was not real because this thing had shown me that it could just create it. But, I sorted that out later and said, well, if it's made of this energy that feels like love, then it's even more real and it matters more. So, that's kind of my first experience with the psychedelics and out-of-body experiences, but I kept up with it. And at one night I was kind of in a trance state. And if you've ever been on psychedelics, they do stuff to your hands. Not like when you talk, but there's a kind of a thing they do. They make your hands move like you're manipulating energy. And so I was on the ground and I was making these concentric circles, not really knowing what the hell I was doing, but I was doing it. And I felt like I was putting a call out to something. And, I went to sleep, and the next day my mom comes into the room and says, "Did you see what was outside last night?" And I said, "No," because I usually have curtains on my window. And she said it was a big black serpent flying in the air. And I thought, oh crap, what did I do? Like, did I have anything to do with this big serpent thing? And I said, no, I didn't see anything, but it was interesting. And the next thing that happened was, it was around December of 2019. And I got a call from a friend saying, hey, do you have a bass? You know, I'm playing the show. And I said no, but he's like, well, you should come anyways. And I said, okay. And this was around 11 at night, and this was in Lincoln Heights, and I hear an owl outside. And I said, there's an owl outside. And this was just really strange because it's not a rural area. It's, you know, it's almost right next to this. So it's like, what is this? And so I recorded the owl. And I just thought, you know, it's really strange. I told my mom about it the next morning, and she was like, that ain't good. She said, there's a saying, it's tecolote viene, indio muere, which means it signifies death. That whenever an owl comes, there's death. And, you know, different cultures have different beliefs on the owl. But a week to the day, my mom ends up getting sick. And she ended up being in the hospital for a bit, and she did recover, but she was in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And when she came back, about a week after that, you know, I had been, you know, prior to this, I had been taking care of the room. Like the room just, it didn't look the way I wanted it to look. You know, it was kind of decked out with the old marble toys and all that stuff, and that just wasn't me. And the psychedelics really do change you. They do this transformation, and it starts within, and then you just kind of put it out, and everything around has to change. So I had changed the entire room, and the windows hadn't been, I put a new bar. Actually, I hadn't put the new bar, so that's why there wasn't any curtains up. So I was sleeping every night with just the sky. And so my mom came home. It was about a week after that. And, you know, I was in bed at night. And this was just a very strange experience. And I can only call it like a dream within a dream within a dream. And so I was in bed, and there was no psychedelics involved in this. I had just kind of stopped for a bit, and I was just doing my regular meditation and that kind of thing. So I wake up, and the room is exactly as it is, everything where it should be, and everything's really bright. And I go to the window, and what I see in the window is not what should be there. What should be there is the next building over, the roof. But what's there instead is a big field, and people having picnics. They're all dressed like, I don't know, like Mary Poppins, and they have umbrellas, and I'm looking at this, and I say, this isn't real. And I immediately just wake up again. And this time it's, you know, the room is the same, it's bright. And I go over to the window, and this time it's a big, like, rocky looking mountain and a little train going into the tunnel. And I said, wow. I grab my phone, I take a picture, I look down to see the picture, but it's not there. Then I look up, and it's the roof that should be there. And I had this feeling of confusion, and I woke up again. Still daylight, I go, and in the window now is this enormous pyramid, but it's inverted. It's just dark, like obsidian dark, and it's got golden hieroglyphics all over it. I don't know if it was Greek or Egyptian or what it was, but it had it all over it. This thing was slowly just kind of turning. And it was just really, really big. And I was like, grab my phone. I try to take a picture of it, but the phone won't turn on. And then what happens is the phone starts forming a kind of outline of two eyes, and then an outline of a head. And I recognize the shape. It's kind of looks like the logo to the Alienware computers. And I looked at it, and I said, in my mind, I said, alien. And as soon as I said that, a net of red energy just starts kind of coming out of the phone, and it's just shaped like a grid, and it's red. I can't move. I'm completely paralyzed. And I'm standing, and the only movement I made was sideways. I started tilting sideways. And the walls started warping. Everything just started kind of changing, and this thing just kind of got bigger and bigger, and it felt so weird. It felt like if you've ever been electric shocked a little bit and it grabs you, like that. So it was a little painful, not too much, but it was, the feeling in my mind felt primal, like I was an animal. Like I was just, it was not a good feeling, and this thing just took over, and then I wake up again, but this time the room is dark. And I'm laying on my bed, and there's a little girl next to me. And she's got blonde hair and like a little kind of dress. And she looks kind of like the dress that the character in an old show called Small Wonder wore. And she was looking away from me, and I had this feeling, this is my daughter. I don't know why I had that feeling, but I touched her shoulder, and she turned around. She had these big insect eyes and this big smile. And there was like kind of like a telepathic communication. She said, "We're here." And I went, and I blacked out because my body was afraid. There was no thought. It was just my body just shocked. Like, I blacked out. And my first instinct was like demon. You know, this is some kind of demon. And I woke up the next morning, and it was really strange because it was a kind of this groggy feeling of like something was trying to make me forget. But I remembered. And the phone that was involved in all this, there was no pictures on it or anything, but it wouldn't turn on. It was an old Samsung S4. My girlfriend at the time gave it to me, and it was a perfectly good working phone, and it was just not turning on. And then when I got it to do something, it was in like a loop. It would go to the Samsung logo, and then it would turn off. It would just kind of, it would keep doing that. It was like in some kind of boot loop. And I tried charging it, it wouldn't charge. Eventually I just smacked it on the table, and it started working. I noticed that I had a mark. And I don't know when I noticed that I had the mark, but I know it wasn't there. It was like this little lump that I have here, and I can share a picture with you of it. And it was like this little scar tissue, and I can feel the lump here now. And I went to the doctor, and she's like, "Oh, it's just, you must have gotten injured there or something." And I'm like, "No, I never got it. I had no injury there." So, you know, I see that people go to places and have things taken out, but I don't really want to do that, and I don't know why. You know, it's just there, and I don't know if it's related, but I don't feel like going and finding out. But, you know, I had been on the spiritual path for a while, you know, but this, it threw me off. I stopped meditating. I cut off everything paranormal. I was watching a show at the time called Bedtime Stories. I had just found the channel, and I said, no more. I'm done with all of it. I stopped looking into aliens. I stopped looking into everything. And, you know, the thing is with these beings that, you know, with the insect-looking eyes, grays or whatever you want to call them, this looked like this little girl looked human, but she had the eyes of one of those things. You know, she was kind of grayish, blonde hair, just ridiculously big smile, and the eyes were just so dark, like void almost. And that doesn't sound scary, but when you see it in real life, you don't get to decide that it's scary or not. Your body tells you. It's like if you're walking and you see a snake, your body reacts for you. And that's how this thing was. And so it threw me off of the spiritual path. I shut off everything, and I said, I don't know what I did. I must have opened some kind of door, and now these things are coming, and I might have invited something, and that's what I did for a while. And I reached out to someone who did regression, Barbara Lamb, and I didn't hear from her. She didn't respond. So at that time, it was pretty much 2020, and everything shut down. And I really needed to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was still kind of wrestling with this experience that had happened, and I needed to meditate, but I was afraid of opening that door again. And I slowly started kind of building up and doing just very light meditation and really getting back into nature and walking and hiking, that kind of thing. And I saw a post on Reddit. Someone was talking about hypnosis, and it caught my interest simply just because I wanted to experience, like, what's that compared to meditation? What is it like compared to the psychedelic world? What's the big deal? So it was like a 15-minute introduction, and there was a few other people in there, and it was he did his thing, and it was interesting, and I thought it was like, oh, that wasn't like a big journey or anything, but okay. And he put in one suggestion in there that said, you're going to do the things you've wanted to do. And something that I didn't mention in my journeys with the psilocybin is that when I finally went for it, when I decided I was going to do it, I decided I was really going to do it. I went into a cabin in Julian, California, and I took the big dose, like the pile. I made a tea, and I said, I'm going to do this in a spiritual way, and it's going to be with meditation, and the blinders, and the whole thing. And it was not what I expected it to be. It was a very healing thing. I heard a voice, a feminine voice, and it presented itself as the consciousness of Earth. Like, this is Earth, it's in pain, it needs help. And I was shown visions of just the Earth in pain, and visions of friends and hugging friends and that kind of thing. And towards the end of the journey, I saw wolves kind of running around the forest, and almost like a carousel. They were like white and ghostly. And I was told, help us. And that's when I saw the kind of the hugging and friends, and it had a mission for me, but I didn't know what it was. And that kind of brings me back to the suggestion this hypnotist said, is you're going to do the things you've been wanting to do. And I thought, I could do what you do, because this is something. And a week after he did that, I went into a college for hypnotherapy, and I thought I could help people who have had experiences like this. And I started doing that again, and going with my meditation. And I did have another experience that was strange in my dreams. And it was interesting because it was a regular dream. I was with a friend in Venice Beach, and we went to one of his friend's houses, and we were, just checking out her place. But all of a sudden, I was pulled from that dream through what looked like, the old screensavers on Windows. And I was going through this tunnel, but then I was in a room, completely white room. There was someone in a hazmat suit, and they put me on this like steel table, and they scanned me with like this red thing. It was just really odd, because it was like I'm having a normal dream here, and then I'm pulled from the dream and I'm somewhere else. But that was the only experience I had while I was, working with learning this hypnotherapy thing. And, once I learned how to do past life regression, I thought, I want to help people with this kind of thing. So I made a post on Reddit and, said, any alien abductees, I'm doing free pro bono sessions. And I got a flood of emails, and, I started picking out the ones that sounded really interesting. And at the same time in school, I met someone else who had had an experience as well. His name is Byron Woodman, and he's a fantastic hypnotherapist. But we decided we were going to do sessions on each other for past life. And it reminds me of that old movie where they keep killing each other and going into this, I don't remember what it's called, but they made a remake of it. It was pretty good. And so we're doing these sessions, and, I don't know what I'm going to see. Mostly people see like, oh, you were Native American, or you were like a warrior and that kind of thing. But that's not what I saw. Like, what I saw was something just really strange and psychedelic. I was told a kind of narrative about the earth being almost like an egg. And then within the egg, there was a goddess. And I was shown a different planet. This planet was dying. And the beings that were on there abandoned the planet. They left. And because they left, they cut themselves off from the energy of the planet, which was what they lived off, and they became like dragons, like these shadowy dragons. They left and they came here. And it showed me that they are trying to make this planet cold. And that what the people here on Earth need to do is make the planet warm. Because if the planet goes cold, it dies, and these serpents, they kept referring to them as serpents, would eat the planet. And that by heating it up, we allow the thing that is within to be born. And it was just a really weird tale, that I was told with this. And the planet that they came from, it didn't die, that it went through a transformation, and the people who remained on there, they were gifted some kind of energy. Like they became dragons as well, but they were like made of light. But that's the extent of the sessions that I had with Byron. And as far as the sessions I had with the people on the Experiencers subreddit, I did quite a few of the sessions, and it was really rewarding because some people had not done some work that they were doing. Like, I remember one person had seen something in the forest. He saw a flying saucer, and he was a geologist, and he was a very rational person. And seeing this, it completely devastated him. He stopped doing his work. He said, I can't do my work. It's too much. And, just speaking with him, me sharing that I've had experiences as well, he had a trust. And it's like, we talked, and him knowing that it was a kind of conflict between what he had seen consciously, but his mind was struggling with himself. But when he accepted that, hey, I really did see this thing, and it's fine, that there's others out there, and he went back to work. He got his gear, and he messaged me. He's like, I'm back at work. And that was just so damn rewarding. And what I noticed with a lot of the abductees is that there's a message given to them. And sometimes the message is, you need to find God. And it says, you need to come back here more and more. You need to keep searching for the answers. And some people get lost in it. Like they want to know more. They want to uncover the mystery. And they keep wanting to go into the sessions and see more and more and more. And life around them falls apart. And they get really kind of in the zone of, I need to discover the mysteries of the universe. And I'm going to do it. And I need the knowledge consciously. I need my mind to know and understand everything. And this thing becomes very deceptive, like this experience, because it tears their life apart. It makes them obsessed with knowledge. And there's almost like a fear that's in them. And that's only part of the experience, though, because some people react a completely different way. They get a kind of a feeling of enlightenment and a feeling of upgrades and downloads, this kind of thing. So, it was kind of a mixed bag. But I think a person's personality will really kind of determine where they go with this. But sometimes just revealing that they were in a kind of loop of, I got answers, but I got 3 more questions. And then I got the answers to those 3 questions, but then 3 more questions popped up. And then you kind of let them know, like, you just kind of guide them through it, and they're like, huh. And some of them just pop out of it and just say, well, I'm done with it. I'm going to go back to just enjoying things. I'm going to go back to hiking or working or anything. So that was always nice to see that. And it was right around that time when I finally received an email from Barbara Lamb. She said, hey, you messaged me about your experience in 2018. And I said, wow, well, I don't really want to do that. I don't really want to touch that, in my mind. It was still a little bit of fear, but I decided if I'm going to be putting people through these experiences, I need to have the bravery to go through it myself and see what was there. Like, what are these beings doing? So, I scheduled a session with her, and I went and to visit her and everything. And, I went in with some fear, but not too much, because at that point, I'd come around in my journey to kind of accepting Jesus, and the fear of that experience was just melting away because I felt protected. So, I talked to her, and, my intuition was these things are demons, they're bad. And what I saw in the experience was not what I expected. We went through the relaxation techniques and everything, and what I saw, that I was in the room, the little girl was there, she had her hand on my heart, she was doing something with energy, she was moving like this energy through me. In the corner of the room, there was a woman that looked like a tree, and she had the same kind of eyes that the little girl did. And with her, there was 2 white wolves just sitting with her. And I was able to kind of interact in this experience, and ask questions like, what are you? And she said, we're not aliens, we're fairies. Yeah. And she said, I'm the tree of life. And this has always happened. That what she was doing to me was some kind of thing for fertility. And that every time that someone connects to nature, that one of these little beings is born. And it's kind of like a cycle. We help them live, and they help us live. And I was shown the inside of that ship, the pyramid. And it was just this big, long hallway. And at the end, there was a window, and it was just very dark. You couldn't see out. But there was a bunch of these children, a few of these women who looked like trees. And the children were kind of playing with these blocks, and they were levitating them. And, it's not what I expected. And they mentioned something about that they would be lied about, that they would be cast as aliens, but that the dragons would lie about them. And it was very relieving once I came out. It kept showing me honey as well. I don't know why. And it kept showing me honey in the tree, and I don't know what the deal was with the honey, but I started drinking honey, and it ended up kind of kicking my addiction to sugar. So that was interesting. Um, so after that, you know, things started kind of happening in this place where I'm at now, and I had a kind of what you would call an astral projection type dream, and it was just very kind of mundane. I was just getting up to go to the restroom, and I saw a very quick like shadow just. It went from the living room to the kitchen, so there's a dividing wall, so I went into the kitchen and I saw it wasn't the hat man, it was the hat boy. It was much shorter, but it was just still with the hat. And I saw it and I just, I woke up. It was shocking to see the thing, but then my wife started seeing things. And she woke up in the middle of the night from a bad dream, but as she opened her eyes, she looked above me. There was what she described like a big mass shadow, but with hair coming down. And it was like a woman, she said, and it was pointing towards the bathroom. And she closed her eyes and opened them, and then it was gone. But soon after that, we started having different things on our body. Like I had these big scratches on my back, and she had like some marks on her leg with like a hand that looked like kind of like this. And I took pictures that I can share with you as well. And I'm not afraid of these things anymore. So they happen, but I said they can't really hurt me, and that's kind of what I've learned from this whole experience. If you are connected to spirituality and God, that these things don't have power over you, and not to show them fear, at least the ones that are the shadow beings and that kind of thing. Because I've watched your show, and there was a gentleman talking about a werewolf, and you ever see that, run. Because that's something else. That's I wouldn't stand up to that kind of thing. But
shout out to Matt Emsch.
Yes, so he did the right thing. And it's just been an insane journey. And this thing that happened in the room. I mean, there was another experience as well where I was in the room with my wife, and at the time her mom was living here, and we have a bathroom behind the TV. And whenever anyone went into the bathroom, the TV would the reception would die. And it was one time we were watching, I think, Friends, and we saw her mom pass by and go into the bathroom, and she had been in there for quite a bit. And I said, go check on her, but maybe we can watch the show, because it was just the reception was gone. So she went in and she knocked in there, and she hears her mom from the living room, and she's like, "You're not in the bathroom?" He's like, "No. Have you been in the bathroom today? Not today, but have you been in the bathroom within the last 15 minutes? She's like, "No." And it was strange, because when we saw her pass by, she was like, she looked at us, and I said, I wrote down the color that I saw her wearing, and I said to my wife, what was she wearing? She said, "An orange top." I was like, "Yes, look, an orange top." And we asked her, but she was wearing something completely different. I said, were you wearing an orange top? And she said, "Yeah, earlier in the day." So it's just really interesting things like that. And I feel like the phenomenon really does play with time. And I ended up looking up the history of the area where the experience in 2018 with the pyramid, where that happened. And it was near kind of by Dodger Stadium, in the Lincoln Heights area. So there's a park there, Elysian Park, and I found a link that showed people dressed exactly like what I saw in the field, with that fashion with the umbrellas and everything. And the other thing that was in that link was a tunnel. like a rocky mountain looking tunnel and a train going in it, and that I believe became the 110 freeway. So those
Whoa.
things seeing before the actual pyramid, they had been there at one time, and it has a way of playing with time.
That's a trip, man. That's wild. Thank you, by the way, for sharing. Like, this is awesome. So thank you for taking your time and just sharing what you have. But one thing that really stuck out to me that I thought was very interesting is during your session with Byron that you had mentioned that the serpents were illuminated, or that they were illuminated ones. Do I got that right? Is that
Yes, it
yeah,
was some of the sessions he was doing on me, my colleague Byron Woodman. It was the beings that remained on that planet. They were given the gift of life from this being for not abandoning her, and they became kind of like light dragons.
right.
Yeah, and the ones that left became like shadow because they were cut off. And they came here, and it was there was more to that experience, and it just gets wacky, and it's kind of hard to share because what I saw was like these little things all over our planet. They were like little dragons, and I saw them in a place all around on the ground, and they were always kind of near people, and they were hissing at each other and fighting, and it showed how they're able to kind of latch on to people's minds, and they feed through a kind of negativity and through electronics for some reason. And I mean, it gets really wacky, and it's like,
That's wild, man. When people, they're like, "Well, I don't know if I should share this because it's kind of strange." I'm like, "Trust me." I'm like, you can't one up. I've heard some out there stuff. The more I do what I do, and the more I hear and read, I'm very fortunate that I have someone who works for me who is literally a walking compendium of knowledge regarding this field, and just some of the stuff I hear, it's like I literally feel like we're living in an X-Files episode because the truth is stranger than fiction. It's like the more you know, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, like we really, our reality, what we know to be real is just like this tiny sandbox of what we're allowed to see and know about. And it's like you go beyond that and there's so much more. Uh, what I thought was really interesting about the Byron experience, I don't know if you know anything about like Hebrew and esotericism, but funny enough, did you know that serpent in the Bible is actually in Hebrew, it's shining one? A lot of people don't know that. It has something to do with a snake. So I'm like, so when I hear this kind of stuff that's unrelated, it's like there's stuff going on that we don't know about. And I talk to other people too who may not know anything about the Bible or who aren't biblically literate. I'm like, so I don't know if you know much about Genesis, but after the garden happens and so Adam and Eve have a son, Cain, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Well, God supposedly marks Cain for murdering Abel. And the reason he marks him is so that the others will know what he did. But at the time, if there's only Adam and Eve, who are the others? Who else is here? So it's just like little things like that. Then you're like, there's stuff that was going on in this world and realm of time that we're not told about, that we don't know. Um, and with how it seems to be in terms of what's publicly available, it almost seems like they don't want the public to know about these things. I don't mean to kind of go down that conspiracy rabbit hole, but it's like, why is there such that this strong arm to try and keep all of us in the matrix, in the sandbox? It's anyway, it was really interesting to me when you said that. I was like, wow, like interesting you would mention that. You also talked about honey in the tree. I'm not too educated on that, but it almost seemed to me like that was symbolic of something. Maybe honey would refer to life force. I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that?
I delved in after. I did some research on YouTube, and I said, well, that was a wild experience with the fairies. I don't know anything about fairies, so let me look up some fairy lore. I found a channel on YouTube with, I don't know what it's called, something like Black Dragon Cafe or something. The
Mm-hmm.
guy's a great storyteller, but he had all this knowledge about fairies and in the Celtic tradition.
Oh yeah.
And they mention the ash tree, and that there's a connection to ash tree and honey, but there's also a connection to fairies and dragons and the ash tree.
Yep.
There's some kind of thing there, and this wasn't in my realm of knowledge. Like, I never looked into Celtic traditions or anything, but it was interesting that it was all there. And it's almost like when people delve into their minds, they see the story that underlies things, and it touches upon different religions, and that's really interesting. You mentioned the Bible story, and people who delve into stuff like Kabbalah and everything, and just kind of the mystery religions and going within. I believe they're seeing these things, and you mentioned different umbrellas on the paranormal,
Mm-hmm.
and these umbrellas do exist within UFO community. You have people who believe it's solid nuts and bolts, and then you have your consciousness people. And I think there's another place there. I think it's the psychedelic community. I think they're having quite a bit of experiences, and they're disregarded. They're disregarded because, okay, your experience wasn't real. Both sides kind of just look at them and say, well, you're on drugs. That's just you tripping. But there's a commonality between, near-death experience, out-of-body travel, psychedelic experience, alien abduction. They all kind of have a similar thread in them.
No, you're right. So interestingly enough, and we touched upon this pre-interview, or maybe I don't remember, dimethyltryptamine. For those that don't know, DMT is the natural, dare I say, hallucinogenic that's produced by your brain right when you're born, right when you die, during your dream state, actually. And it is the chemical that makes you dream. I don't know if you can cook it, but apparently you could have DMT tea, you could smoke it. It gives these short bursts of almost interdimensional, like, psychedelic experiences. So with LSD and psilocybin, a lot of the hallucinations are more distortions of the reality around you. I'm sure you've noticed that. I've noticed that. But it's like on DMT, you're somewhere else. You go to another plane of existence. You're talking to interdimensional beings, and you can get to that state too if you take enough of psilocybin or LSD. But if we're just talking like general doses, most people don't. But yeah, DMT is this whole other thing. People with psychedelic experiences are written off, and I actually just talked about something very similar to this in a recent. I just shot it yesterday, and it had to do with the when people are in that kind of like half awake state. And I'm sure there's a name, like a scientific name for it. But there's a lot of belief around the fact that state makes you more susceptible to the unseen realm and things that aren't normally there that you can actually see and interact with. But also, unfortunately, it makes it prone to being written off as just, oh, you're half asleep or you're tripping, or like there's something. But I've always been a believer that taking those, not sleep, but taking psychedelics opens you up to see things, dare I say, you're not allowed to see, or maybe we weren't meant to see. And for some people, it's good experiences. For other people, it's horrific experiences. It all just kind of ties in together. And I just think what you had to add to that was very fascinating.
Yeah, it's a kind of hypnagogic stage in between sleep and awake. And, people who do out-of-body travels, they use that particular moment. And, in hypnosis, we call it a hypnotic state, but it's very easy to go into a different realm from that particular place right when you wake up. Like, I've had experiences where I wake up, I go right back to sleep, and I am aware that I'm in bed, but I'm somewhere else.
Right.
And it's really interesting because you can touch, everything's tactile. And the place I went was just like a desert with cubes in it. And I was picking up the cubes, and I said, I can't believe how real this is, but I feel my body in my bed, but I'm touching this. Where the hell am I? And it feels like it's right behind the eyelids. And, that state is it's a place that feels more real than real. And the psychedelic as well. It's I like to call it hyper real. Because it feels much more real.
I think our brains are far more powerful than we ever give them credit for. I feel like our brains are far more powerful than science can ever begin to explain. And I'm not saying that in any way to diminish or put down anyone's experience. I say this because it's like there's so much that we don't know between our conscious, subconscious, the brain, and our spirit, that it's like I feel like there's a lot more that we could really uncover. And I feel like just with having all these experiences, and it's like especially like you're talking about, like how you can be out of body and just like you were mentioning, being one place and another, that you're not able to discern where am I, or is this even reality? Like that's mind blowing to me. No pun intended. It really is. I was just like, wow. I mean, that our brain is that powerful. I mean, psychology has always been an interest of mine. I'm no expert on it, obviously, but the way the human psyche works and interprets things and compartmentalizes things, and especially like even in traumatic experiences, like this is kind of going back to your dad and the household, how especially like with traumatic events where like you intake it, you process it, but your brain almost has defense mechanisms to preserve the self-being. Like, how does a computer have that kind of awareness to do that? You know what I mean? So like, and I'm sure you've with working with trauma victims, some of them have to be brought into a hypnosis to remember, bring these things back up, because like they suppress it, even though they have the trauma from it, like those memories are not present unless it's brought up. And so like that always blows me away how the brain can do that. Do you believe in any way, shape, or form that the environment you grew up in, specifically with the negative energy and the violence your dad brought, do you think that opened up the door to these things coming in the house and what you experienced in any way?
I do. I do, because I've had people tell me that they're seeing shadow beings, and there's always high stress. Like, what's going on in your life, because it's something that we treat with hypnosis. We don't work in demons and stuff. It's like a no-no in hypnotherapy, but we can help them in different ways. And usually it's like, well, what's going on in your life? Let's just bring down your stress, and then that goes away. So there's two thoughts. There's the thought that we are manifesting these things with our mind through our trauma, and we are making them real. Then there's the thought that we're opening a door. And I side more on that we're opening a door. And it's almost like these things come to feed.
Yes.
They feel the fear, the anger, the sadness, the grief, and they come. And they set people off in this vicious cycle, because the person's already feeling crappy, and then they show up and stand there all creepy like and do their things, and they add more, and then it starts this cycle of fear now. And it can remain for a very long time. So I do think that people have the ability to open portals. And back to your comment on things we're not supposed to know, there are the mystery religions, that organizations like the OTO, where they know about these things. They know that they can open portals with meditation, but we're not told about it. We're just told, hey, meditation is good for you. And it is, there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's also the possibility of opening portals. It's very deceptive, because that spiritual path can take you to a place of being addicted to the path. Sometimes people get visions of this kind of utopian world that we can create. But when those lessons of that land of the spirit world, when they're applied into this world, we get death. It doesn't work that way. You can't take the laws and the spiritual realities of that realm and bring them here. It just doesn't play over you. It's like you're applying the rules of the land of the dead into the land of the living. You're going to get death. So
start calling it the unseen realm now, because that's really what it is. It really is real. I guess this third density, this third dimension, we can't see into. So the only thing I can think of is that whatever these other beings are, fourth dimension or whatever, they can. They're here right now with us. They see everything, they can interact with us. I may have mentioned this in a previous interview, and I wish I could remember her name, but she was a physicist, or I believe she's a physicist, and she demonstrated how like these kinds of things work, how these kinds of things work using 2 dimensions. And she's like, okay, me being a 3rd dimensional being, I can alter the perception, space, and time of a 2D plane and the people in it without them ever knowing I exist. And she like drew a stick figure and drew the stick figure holding a safe. And she's like, look, I can open the door to the safe, take the jewel out. He has no idea I did it. She's like, on top of that, I could also alter events and points in time in this 2D plane, future, past, and present, without them ever being aware that I'm doing it. Like that kind of thing really hit me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like the beings that kind of operate beyond what we know, it's the same thing. That's why they can go back. I don't want to say go back and forth between time, but the concept of time is really something only we know in this realm, because that's how you operate outside of the third density or third dimension, and outside our realm of time. It is like that, where you can look down almost like a timeline and manipulate and do things whatever, whenever and however you wish. I want to go back to what you're saying about portals. What are your thoughts on portals? I know that's a really ambiguous question, so answer it whatever way you want.
I really like what you said about time. So let me touch on that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I like it because it kind of it ties back to the kind of work I do. You know, I created this system called Origin Hypnosis, and that's what I do is I play with time. You know, when I'm trying to bring healing to someone, is I take their mind on a journey through different points, and we don't do regression. You know, like straight up regression, because it can bring up trauma, but
Sure.
we can take them into places in an empowered state. So I like taking people into the future first. I think if they can see a vision of themselves in a powerful state, then you can take them back and do that kind of like inner child work that people need. Playing with time and reframing things, changing things. It's such a powerful way of healing. And, you know, it doesn't really matter if the experience they're having is real or not, because it heals them. You know, it heals them, reframing things that happen, seeing them from a powerful position. It's just so damn healing. But as far as portals, to me, I think that realm is the dream realm. I think the dream realm and the spirit realm are one and the same. The beings there know how to get here. And I believe within when they dream, they travel. They know how to astral travel from their place to our realm. And when we dream, we go to their realm. And that's kind of a portal that gets opened up. So it's playing with the dream. And I think the mind is heavily involved, but I think we have different ways of creating portals. I think we can create one with the heart, which is the most powerful one.
Yes, sir.
And to me, that's the one that heals. Because I mentioned previously how some people get trapped in a kind of a loop of spirituality, and it becomes very harmful. And really the only way to come out of that is a surrender. And it's a kind of surrender to God, surrender to the heart. And then a kind of true knowledge is born, not one of intellect, but one of love. And that just opens someone up. And once you have that kind of resonance, that you're resonating on this love, these beings, they don't really like that flavor, I think. So they don't come around too much.
Yeah, you know, kind of going back to what you were saying about the laws, spiritual laws, that there's definitely spiritual laws in place of like where and what entities, beings, whatever they are, can and can't do. And this actually is going to segue what I wanted to ask you about regarding cryptids and just physical humanoid entities. And the reason why I want to say with that is because, and I'm not talking like Bigfoot, dogman, just specific. I'm talking like humanoids in general. And the reason I ask that is because people will ask, okay, well, if these beings are really international force or just out and about, how come they're not just teleporting into people's houses and killing people or just doing whatever they can? And the only thing that I can really, the only conclusion I can come to is there's no other answer. There has to be spiritual laws in place that they must follow. The same way we have to obey the laws of physics. There's things and places and people they can't go and touch, and there's other people and places they can touch and harm. Why? We don't know. Is it possible that living a certain life, doing certain things, opens yourself up to that kind of thing? Possibly. Much the same way living certain life and doing certain things can prevent you from having those experiences. But yeah, so when people say that, I'm always like, well, they have to follow a rule set just like we do. I mean, if you believe that there's a God and you believe that everything is interconnected in that way, then yes, you know, that there has to be some sort of governing system of order in place, right? Which is really interesting that even someone who, I don't think you even have to believe in a religious system of any kind to like grasp that concept, or to like, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, that would make sense. Because it's like, you look at all these things that are happening, like just with abductions, sightings of cryptids, and like you kind of can start putting pieces together. You're like, that there's something going on here. But specifically, there's a reason why these things are doing what they're doing and what they're allowed to do. These beings, if they really wanted to, they could break in your house and just rip you to shreds. But they, there is some stories that, but they primarily don't. They like to really feed off that terror, and then it's like they get what they need. And so it's just, I don't know, man, it's just really interesting. Like I tell people, the more I do this stuff, it's almost like you have that big conspiracy board where all the lines are connected. Everything just starts pointing back to the same thing, or some of the same things over and over again. And the way I tell people, like, this we're not in a rabbit hole. We are in a rabbit tunnel. And this massive tunnel has all these chambers that just keep leading down to other chambers, and they're all interconnected. And we each have a little bit of the tunnel and chambers explored that we keep bringing together. Like, oh, that connects here, and that makes sense why this is over here. How do you think that cryptids like Bigfoot, Dogman, just Mothman, like physical entities, connect back to all of this? You could also throw in the Fae in there as well.
There are better, or not, I wouldn't say better, but there are more sinister things to do than just to kill someone. Because if you kill them, that's it. You're not getting your meal, And I think the answer was in what you said, that they like to feed off the fear. So they scare the hell out of people and then just eat. I think the thing is that these things are kind of physical and they're not. Like, they're both. Mm-hmm. It's like they can be physical, they can phase out of our physicality, and they seem to be in nature quite a bit. And
yeah.
In Guatemala, where my mom is from, she saw a lot of things in the forest,
Duende.
Yeah, duendes and all kinds of stuff. And, they had a forest that was known to be enchanted, and just kids disappeared there. She had a story once that she was with her mom, and they were gathering coffee, and their brother was with them, and he was kind of walking off, and they followed him, and they kept calling him, and he just kept walking. And then they realized that hours had passed, and it was getting dark. And her mom just realized, this is not your brother. This is not good. And they went back home, and, her dad was there, and he was hungry. He's like, where have you guys been? And he said, we were trying to catch up to Cristobal. And he's like, he's been here for hours, and that kind of thing. And, she had an experience once where she was with her sisters, and they were doing the same thing, gathering coffee. And all of a sudden she found this place. It was just incredibly beautiful, like flowers everywhere that she'd never seen. And she was like, where is this place? It was just water and everything. It was just the most beautiful place. And then she feels herself being pulled, and it's like, where were you? And her sister pulled her. She was like, I was right here. It's like, we've been looking for you for hours. You can slip into this ether of dream, never come back. And I think that's what these beings want, is they either want to feed off you, or they just want to take you.
Yeah.
I think killing you is, you don't want to leave that trail of evidence, then you'll be hunted, It's like, I think that these beings like Mothman and, Dogman and everything, I think they're from that realm. I think they come here, they come to portals, and, you mentioned about how living a certain way opens you up to that. And, I asked my mom, because she used to see a lot of things, especially Hat Man. She was terrorized by Hat Man her whole life. And she said it all started when she left church and would go spy on a group of spiritualists that were there. She'd spy on their seances. And since she started doing that, then the Hat Man started showing up. A lot of these things that people are doing with seances and, astral travel, our culture is pretty secular, and we don't believe in the power of these things. We just think it's good fun. Like, oh, we can just out-of-body travel. It's just something our mind can do. There's no demons there. It's, it's nonsense. You might consciously believe that, but subconsciously it's a different thing. And those things do believe in you.
Yeah.
So I would say everyone be safe with the travels that you do. It's a question I always ask experiencers who have had these alien abduction experiences. Did you call them? Almost everyone always says, yes, I did. I called them. And it's like you call them, they come.
But I know a big way that people do it, right? Will be with Ouija boards, right? They'll kind of harmlessly play around. And I know a lot of people use that as ways to try and contact things, but I have read so many stories where people used it or were a part of one. Same with seances too. And I don't want to say they were followed home, but they start having experiences. And it's like, okay, well, like you have to understand that our world, we understand that as just this thing, but in that realm, that's a gateway to come through and to either latch itself onto. I mean, you don't know what you're opening the door to. And so I tell people too, I'm like, dude, you better be careful, like what you do. What you do here has far more implications than you could ever realize, because you can't see into that. You're basically walking blind and just like, oh, I'll be fine. You have no idea. Yeah, that's a lot of faith to have as a blind man, right? With that said, I want to jump into the doppelganger. So you mentioned seeing a doppelganger of your mom. What's crazy, and you're the only person I've talked to that's had another doppelganger experience, is I had a very similar experience with mine with my dad. So back in 2014, my wife and I weren't married yet. And at the time I was living at my folks' place, and I had a bedroom, and my wife and I were sitting just on the bed just talking, and I had my bedroom door open, and I see my dad walk by, and he kind of just same thing, looks at me and walks into the bedroom. I don't think anything of it, and he comes out and he's in a completely different set of clothes. And it's not exactly weird, because he would go in and change his clothes sometimes, like, get ready for the day. And at one point when we went out to the living room to go ask him something, I don't remember what it was, and he's sitting at the dining room table on his laptop, and he's in his old outfit, and we're like, why did you change back to your old clothes? When did that happen? And he's like, what are you guys talking about? You're crazy. And we're both just like, stop. Like, you're messing, you're trolling us. Like, we literally both watched you walk by, and he's like, you guys are whacked out. Like, there's something wrong. And so we're like, dude, that's weird. Well, come to find out, like, when my mom got home later that day, we started telling her about it. She's like, oh yeah. She's like, I've seen him before too. We're like, what? She's like, yeah, like your dad has a doppelganger we've seen a couple times. Like, that's crazy. So it's
Wow.
just like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what classification you call it. I don't know what the purpose is of it. I don't know. It's weird, man. It's very strange.
Wow. It's such a similar story with the clothes.
Yeah.
I mentioned the being that my wife saw over me that was pointing. Where she was pointing was towards the bathroom that we saw the doppelganger of her mom just kind of go into. So, I was like, maybe it's pointing to something in the bathroom, but I've never experienced anything in there. But that is a crazy story. Like, in that outfit that he was wearing, have you seen him in that outfit before?
When he walked in the bedroom, he was wearing whatever he was wearing when he was already out there. And from what I remember, he was kind of like in morning attire, and he walked in the bedroom very casually and just got ready for the day, got a shirt on, he always wore jeans and a belt and his shoes, and he walked out casually. And that's what we didn't think anything of it. It was so normal. And that's what went out there. We're like, what? Why would you change back? Like, that's so full, like, it's so alien to do. Like, we're like, what? And not only why did you change back, but when? I had my door open. You can't walk by without us physically seeing you. It's impossible. His doorway's right there in front of our doorway, and there's no way. And it weirded my wife and I. We're like, this is weird. And at the time, I had no concept of a doppelganger. I didn't even know what that was. Like, all I knew was like ghost spirits, yeah, and like Bigfoot. Like, anything other than that, like, I didn't even know about reptilians yet. So like, all that was so new. And so yeah, it's just, I don't know, man. It's weird. And there's a couple experiences I had in that house. I wouldn't say they were terrifying, but they were just strange, and I don't know why. So there's one night in particular. I remember at this time my daughter was up really late. It was like 3 a.m. It was super late, and I was sitting at the dining room table. I also had a laptop too, and I was kind of like bent over like this on my laptop, and we had one of those old wooden chairs that like the lower back area is open, and I think my shirt was like a little bit raised, and all of a sudden I just feel like this poke like on my lower back, and it startled me. I jumped up out of my chair and I was like, oh, because it scared me. And I was convinced my dad would totally do this. He had like woken up, crawled on all fours down the hallway to go up behind me and just poke me with his finger. And when I turned around, there's nobody there. And so I'm looking around the kitchen, I'm looking down the hallway, everyone's in bed, there's nobody around. I'm like, that's weird. And, it wasn't like this icy cold feeling. I didn't feel this demonic aura. It literally just felt like an actual finger. Had you blindfolded me and have somebody poke me, the exact same feeling. And it wasn't hard, like it caused pain, but it was like a physical poke. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the purpose of that was. I don't know why. It was weird. My daughter's on the couch, no word around. So I don't know, man. There's just weird things. I'm like, okay, all right, well.
You reminded me of something that happened in two places, my mom's house and this place. I was on a computer, and I had a big cat at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was like 20 pounds. And I'm on the computer, and part of the chair is still available, so I feel him jump on there, and I go touch him. He's not there. And I'm like, I felt him jump on this chair.
Weird.
And there was another time where I was doing meditation in bed right before I was going to go to sleep, and I felt the bed, like someone sat down in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened my eyes. There was nothing there, and I didn't see the bed come back or anything.
You feel it.
I felt it. Someone sat there, and yeah, there was nothing cold or anything, and it was just crazy. But I mean, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
When you saw your dad pass and he looked at you, did he have anything different going on with the space?
Perfectly normal. He wasn't like, he just literally glanced over at us and just, so yeah, nothing out there at all. And we're in conversation. So, we're like, well, we look over and just make eye contact and go back to talking. So yeah, I think that's why it was so weird, because it was so just normal. And honestly, it's the normalcy of a lot of these situations is like what's so strange about all this stuff. That things are so in place that, like, when you're like, oh, it's actually out of place, that's where like, wait, what? And then you start to like second guess yourself. Like, wait a minute. Am I going crazy? Did I perceive it as that? But it was actually out of place, and I just didn't catch it because I'm so used to like, the normal. And so then you just are like, maybe I'm crazy. Like, no, this can't be right. Because it's like you're always trying to battle with the rational mind that like, no, like everything we know, feel, touch, smell, sense has to operate in this small box that is our physics, and nothing can, leave that box. And if it does, then like, we're wrong. And it's like the older I get, the more I'm like, no. Rational mind, I don't think isn't really a good way to use it. Now, with that said, I feel like going into everything being like, it was aliens, is obviously the wrong way to go about it. Like you have to have some sort of rationality, but I think it just comes down to maturity and discernment. Like you can't use rationality for everything, like your situations or your experiences and some of my stuff. You just take it as it is. You're like, okay, that is what it is. Thank you for the experience. Moving on now.
I mean, you mentioned discernment. I think that's the most important thing. And, people have these experiences with alien abduction, and some of them just fall in love. They're like, oh my God, they're gods, they're angels, they're here to save me. To me, it's always like, look at the fruit. Like, what happens to you? What's going on in your life? Has it improved your life?
Right.
If it hasn't, then, your discernment should go off and tell you this is not a good thing. So I think it's probably the most important thing. And as far as the rational mind, it's going to keep you grounded. It's going to keep you grounded. So use it. But also, if the fight becomes so big where it's like your rational mind is telling you did not see what you saw, then you're going to become in conflict. And I mean, it could affect your health and everything.
I know a lot of like Western thinking is it's like, okay, it's either an angel or a demon, but I'm like, no, I think it's much more than that. So to you or anybody watching, I feel like a good resource too to kind of go into like prehistory is like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Book of Enoch. You go back to all these books that kind of explain things in the ancient world, like ancient Mesopotamia. And there's a lot of stuff going on, interdimensional beings or like, high-end entities that were teaching mankind to do things. It's like, and also like spirits that aren't necessarily demons or angels. Like these are just, they're kind of like, I don't want to say free form, but the reason I say that word is because I talked to an individual who was telling me about jinn. And I know of jinn, I know about them, but they were telling me a lot more about how, like, in their culture, like that they're like, some of them are like, their intentions are evil, but other ones are more just like rogue spirits. It's like you think you like learn something and then you realize like, oh, I read the first chapter of like a 10-book series. I really don't know what I'm talking about. You're like, oh, okay, well, and it would take more than a lifetime to even get into it and search. And so you just try to like pick up the pieces of what you can and start to try to assemble any knowledge you could possibly put together. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's a connection. They may not be the same entities, but they are connected in some way. Wherever you see alien abduction, you usually see shadow people, and kind of like in Skinwalker Ranch, it's like everything shows up there. And the reason I believed in Skinwalker Ranch was because of one of the things that one of the scientists said about one of the portals. He mentioned the size of it. He said it was about the size of a frisbee. And that's what I saw in my experience.
wow. See, you had those moments you're like, oh my gosh, you said what? That's wild. Now, on that note, I want to ask you about native legend, lore, and culture. And I don't know how much you know about the South American history of that, but there's so much like humanoid, UFO. It's just like, it's rich down there. I'd have to find the name of it. I can't remember, but they have a big old reptilian statue of like an ancient god that they call the god of the underworld. And anyway, that's just, there's literally hours worth of discussion in this, but it's just fascinating to me how you have legends and lore that even go up to like North American Native Americans. And, they all have this belief, this conjoined belief that like, yeah, there's all these entities and beings that exist. And it's just a matter of fact. There's no like, oh, well, maybe maybe they exist. Like Bigfoot, for example, all these tribes have their own names for it. Again, it's like a bear existing. It's just matter of fact, there's certain territories you don't go. There's certain things you don't do. And this kind of leads back to the Skinwalker thing. Like there's just certain things you don't do to attract those things. Yes, they exist. Yes, be careful. And it's just so funny because like in modern day culture, for whatever reason, we're so diehard on, the third density science, I call it, where it's like anything beyond that is folklore. It doesn't exist. If it can't be observed and duplicated in this realm, in this density, then it shouldn't even be taken into consideration. But it's like you're dealing with a phenomena that operates far outside of your little physics box. Normally I wouldn't buy into paranormal, anything supernatural. When you take into consideration my own experiences, your experiences, the thousands of people who've had a multitude of sightings and experiences and near-death experiences and all these things that we can't explain, there's clearly something that operates beyond our understanding of time and space. It is what it is. You can't, we can't deny it.
It's a thing where they were closer to nature. They were always around nature. And, our modern culture, we live in cities and we're so far removed away from nature. So we're not exposed to these things. And there's something to nature. They exist, and, shadow people have been seen in forests and that kind of thing. I think it's the closest to nature, but it's kind of double-edged, like a double-edged sword, because healing takes place when you walk in nature. And that's like the best thing I can do for someone, is really have them, encourage them to get back into walking and hiking and that kind of thing. But that's where those things live as well. So it's like the double-edged sword. It's like, take a friend you hike.
What does being out in nature do to the human psyche?
I think it brings them back to balance. I think it brings them back to reality, like real reality, not the culture, not the Instagram, not it's almost like a walking meditation. So you walk, your mind clears, and it's that kind of running voice that feeds off of information. So you watch too many videos, you just take in too much news or negative information, you're feeding this voice, and then it just talks and talks and talks, and it can be very negative for some people. So when you exercise, when you get out into nature and you walk, this voice just kind of quiets down and it becomes more positive. And then if it says anything, it just says, that's a nice looking tree. Just having the fresh air around you, it really brings you back to reality, and you realize that all that shit doesn't matter, because here is a beautiful mountain, a beautiful lake. It brings life back into people. It brings them back into their nature. So getting into nature brings you back into your nature. That's something that's just needed. People need to get back into nature. And I believe that I really don't hypnotize people. I dehypnotize people. And
that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it.
I dehypnotize from mainly culture. a lot of beliefs that aren't your own, and just getting someone back into nature just kind of dehypnotizes people away from the beliefs that aren't their own, and they just start kind of realizing the things that do matter. And when people are having these walks, they start thinking about their loved ones and how I should really hang out with them more, and just the things that matter.
Anyone listening to this, it's like the older you get, you definitely start to realize this, is that your career, how much money you make, the physical things in life, none of it matters. It's all just crap. What really matters in life is the relationships, the people you love, family, friends. That's what's most important. And it's so easy. And I've experienced this lately too, where it's so easy to just get caught up in the throes of life. And, you just get busy, and that, weeks start to cycle, seasons start to cycle. And you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't spoken to this person in like 6 months. You don't even mean to. It's just, it happens to everybody. You get busy, you have a spouse, you have kids, or you just have a job. You kind of just go through life, and it's like you really have to kind of stop and force yourself to smell the roses and make time for those relationships. And I'm still learning to do that. I still struggle with that. I'm terrible at it, believe it or not. But it's like, to really kind of step out and be like, wait a minute, like, no, I need to take this weekend and go see this person or talk to this person and have conversation, because there's going to come a date and time where they die or you die, and it's like, well, and I really think they'll get, one day I'm going to be on my deathbed and I'm going to look back and be like, wow, I should have spent a lot more time with this person, or I should have spent a lot more time, because you're not going to look back in your career and be like, well, at least I made $6,000 a month. that's not going to matter. It's like, or at least I got to a senior executive level. You're not going to think about that. You're going to think about how much you miss your family, or you miss this friend that is gone, or whatever it may be. And so, yeah, I agree with you that for whatever reason, like, we as a race of human being, like, we all just love being out in nature. It's just, you're out in nature, like, wow, this is really calming to like my being, my spirit, whatever it is. It's like, why? I don't know, but I love it. Like, we have a yearning to want to be out in just peace and be surrounded by the foliage and the lake and the mountains. And there's just like you said, it resets you. I feel like it definitely resets you. And when you're in this concrete jungle and you have this in front of your face all flipping day, it distorts not only your reality, but in here, your heart, your mind. And especially for people who all they do is like focus on like negative stories, negative news, Instagram, like that wears on your spirit, man. I got in points in time where I can't look at it anymore. I'm just tired of seeing that. What you feed in here and here comes out. And what you feed in here affects your whole inner being.
Yeah, I call it feeding the dragon. It's the thing that talks and can be negative. It's like the more information you give it, the louder it'll get. So it's healing work is about going within, but then that last piece, it isn't inside of you. It's with other people and your connections. So that's the final piece of the journey, is really reconnect to people, reconnect to friends, family, make new friends, new family. That's where the last piece is. So the abductees, there's like two branches there. There's the abductees and the experiencers, and I think it's like the abductees are the ones that have had the negative experience, and the experiencers, they like the journey and they want more. I think it's both. When I had my visions in out of body travel, I was shown that the thing that makes physical reality is really an energy that is kind of love, and it resonates at a different frequency, and it becomes solid, like it can become reality. So I think these things, they can be both. They can. There's talks of these things walking right through walls, so they know how to manipulate. They know how to change their frequency or something, so they can go through walls, but they can also hurt you. They can become solid and they can hurt you. So
I love to talk about frequency and how things. I don't think when I say a lot of people, I mean like the general public are aware that your entire being operates on different frequencies. But more importantly, your emotions, your thoughts, all are tied to frequency. And my kind of like checkmate to that one is, I'm like, okay, well, funny enough, music is all frequency. Different keys of music also have different effects. And I don't know if there's any musicians listening to this, but supposedly D minor is supposed to be the saddest key. I don't know if that's true or not. Another interesting thing is the 432 and 440. I know that's supposedly a big conspiracy, but if you or anyone listens to like 432 music for 440, there is. I can notice maybe not an auditory difference, because you're not, I don't know if we can hear 8 sense, but you can feel a difference. It's not major, but you could definitely notice a difference. And now what the conspiracy behind it, actually did a video on it like over a year ago. I don't even remember. It's been so long, but it was interesting. It really makes you realize that, like, wow, there's so many things that are tied, like emotions. Because I always tell people, I'm like, well, define music. Well, music is nothing more than pitch and rhythm and time. That's all music is. And so based on that classification, a lot of things are technically considered music. Music has an effect on your subconscious, your conscious, your vibration, all the above, really. And it can dictate how you feel and think.
Yeah, music. I mean, it can be a controversial subject because lawsuits have been placed that certain kinds of music are influencing people in a negative way, and it's controversial because of that. But I think as a musician and anyone who plays music, if you're into metal, if you go to a Slayer concert, it makes you want to punch something, and you just get so full of this, like I said, like not aggressive, but assertive energy, like power. So, there's power in knowing that because you can pick the music that you want to listen to depending on how you want to feel. So, if you're feeling sad all the time and you're listening to this sad music, that's, you're reinforcing that. So you can just put something else on. But I think it does affect emotion. And, when I do sessions, I always put very calming music. And I think the frequencies, I mean, they work in many ways. I mean, people who have tinnitus, and a lot of people who go through paranormal experiences get tinnitus. Something that's very calming for them is 440 sound bowls. You can play the sound bowl and it kind of masks the tinnitus. And there's something that we use in hypnosis. It's called an anchor. So we put them in the state, and whatever they're feeling there, we have them do an anchor so that they can come back to that state at a later moment. I think music is the most powerful anchor. So if you are listening to a song and you get taken back, like I remember when I heard that song, smell is the same.
Nostalgia.
And you immediately start feeling that feeling of having been there. So you can anchor music into moments that you're having and relive them. And that's a very powerful thing to have because a musical anchor is just, it's as powerful as scent. So definitely use the music to affect yourself. And I think information is very hypnotic, cultural stuff, and you can get really easily hypnotized into believing crazy things. But the music unravels that. I think it cleanses the palate of the mind and the soul, and it really just kind of brings you back into a resonance of love. And there is merit in more aggressive music too, because that power, that assertiveness in music like Slayer and that kind of thing, is needed. It is sometimes needed. What if you're out somewhere and someone attacks you? You need to tap into that aggressive energy. So there is merit in all kinds of music. And
I am a massive fan of heavy extreme music. And so honestly, for me, ever since I was like probably like 12 or 13, I know a lot of people are like, it gives me anxiety, but I'm like, honestly, it's kind of therapeutic. Like when I hear those chugging guitars and like double bass, I'm just like, dude, I'm never like, I'm anxiety. I'm like, on that note, there's times where I'm like, I do want to like slow things down and chill, maybe listen to like some like lo-fi, but I definitely don't mind like relaxing. I don't need to like listen to like something that's really fast and extreme just to like go work out or do some extreme. I can just like relax and listen to, technical death metal or something just because it's what I enjoy. And I think what it comes down to when people say, yeah, that's not music, it's just noise. I'm like, well, technically, if we want to look at it like, like a scientist, the more extreme the music, the more percussive and less melodic it becomes. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, the less percussive and more melodic it is. And I've never met anybody who's ever like talked about it like that, but it makes total sense. It's like, well, maybe my brain just reacts more to the percussive side. And so the more extreme you get in metal, specifically like technical death metal, really fast metal, it definitely starts to sound more percussive. You have the vocals, which are kind of more atonal. And even the way it's mixed and mastered, there's so much going on sonically that you start to lose melodic definition and just starts to become more percussive, but to a lot of people it just starts to sound more like noise. And so I almost wonder if there's a reason why certain people tend to like more the more the percussive sonic quality versus melodic. It's just interesting to think about, huh?
that's a really good question. in hypnosis, we break things down to kind of a physical and emotional, which is a kind of introvert or extrovert. And I find that introverts don't really like dancing, and that's the percussive side. The
Whoa.
extrovert tends to like more of the percussive, the motion, and the melodic is more for the introvert. They like to think, they like to chill, kind of be alone. So I think it kind of comes down to your personality. And, dance is just so healing, and when I had that out of body experience and I saw that being creating a planet, she was like kind of dancing like a ballet
Sure.
dancer. And it was kind of told to me that dancing is one of the most important things you can do. And I mean, for stress, if you're stressed, motion, whether it's exercise or dancing or something with music, that just brings it all out. So
Yeah, endorphins get your body rewards the behavior. How you approach this maybe when you treat patients, but maybe people who like kind of got stuck in like dopamine chasing versus addressing the demons at hand.
yes, well, when dealing with clients, is like the thing is education first because they don't know what's going on. And so I'll ask them questions like, how do you feel when you have to wash dishes? And they say, I hate it. I feel it in my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I can't do it. And anything that's mundane is just, they can't do it.
Yeah.
What I like to do is really just inform them of what's going on and have them kind of pull back a little bit, just a little bit, less phone time, and just make the suggestion of walking around right as you wake up. Because most people who are in that dopamine surge, the first thing they do when they wake up is grab the phone and then they just start feeding it. Restructuring the morning is very important. Wake up, don't immediately go to the phone, do something physical. Immediately just go for a walk and do the things that make you feel that knot in the stomach and breathe through it. It's a lot of the breath is going to unravel that. So there's a feeling of danger that happens when people are doing things they don't like doing or being in a situation they don't like being. Is
100%.
There's a kind of activation of fight flight
Mm-hmm.
and a feeling of danger, of wanting to run away or fight, and a tightness here or a tightness here. And so I like to do a kind of a two-prong approach, which is one is like use the rational mind and just say, I'm not in danger, I know that. And so then start unraveling the feeling of it because it's very convincing because of the way it feels. It feels very much like danger. So when you breathe it out, you start unraveling that danger feeling in the physical body and then the rational mind at the same time saying, there is no danger. And I feel like we can move our awareness in different parts of the body. Like if I have you just think about your toe right now, your left toe, you weren't feeling it a second ago, but now you are. So that's like you can move your awareness. So if you move your awareness, usually here, it tends to bring you back into a kind of focus. And that moves you away from back here, which is where people go when they start feeling that kind of anxiety of doing something that doesn't surge the dopamine. It's actually a kind of a light hypnosis that they go into. So bringing them away from the subconscious into the conscious mind awareness. I like to call it the senses, here, 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 into the visual. If they can learn to be in that space, then they don't need the dopamine so much. So it's just really existing and coming out of the mind and going back into the senses.
People who lack structure and their lives are generally more disorganized and chaotic, you generally find that they have a lot more anxiety. They have a lot more, they lack a lot of peace. And I definitely am a huge advocate for taking the time, not just for your mental health, but taking the time to, well, let me say this. When I say take time for mental health, I don't mean take time to do things you enjoy. I mean, take time to restructure your life in a way that's mentally and emotionally beneficial to you, and having order, having regimented, structures in place to make sure that this stays happy and healthy. Like you were saying, like we've become a society where everyone's so glued to this all the time. Get away from this. Go out, walk for 30 minutes, get up, have a cup of coffee and just go spend time out in nature. Do something and not be stuck and looking at a screen all day. If you think from like a biological perspective, we were never designed to, like, this is so foreign to our to our makeup. We were never designed for it. It's almost like we were designed to be outside, or at least be out, in nature, and that, not in an office all day. I feel like this has done this too, where everything is about now, instant gratification, now. We've almost pigeonholed ourselves into this because it's like now a lot of us don't want to take the time to set up a system in place so we'll be successful. It's about what's the easiest way to do this now? What's the easiest way? And it's like, yeah, but that's going to cause you hardships later on. And that's such an open-ended topic to talk about, right? Because like people have that same approach, end up taking those same decisions and walks in life, where it's like it's always about what's easiest now. And there's kind of a charm and romance in hardships in life, because hardships build your character, they build discernment, they build wisdom. It's a beautiful thing to go through hardships. And I understand like going through hardships isn't easy, whether it be financial, grief, whatever it may be. But when you come out the other side, you grow as a human being, you level up. And I just feel like having that is so important, and having a really comfortable life where you don't ever grow. It's just the same thing every day. Like, where's the fun in that? Like, yeah, you were comfortable, but it's good to go through challenges in life. It's good to be challenged, because it forces you to grow in ways that you may have not before. And so you have to adapt, and you have to basically just restructure and reorganize your life. You know what I'm talking about? What do you say to people who've had these horrific abduction experiences where they're actually like physically tortured? That, I know this is like a little left field, but because I've heard some pretty like horrific stories of people who've gone through this stuff. They don't really know how to like deal with it.
Reach out and find the others, find the other people who have had the similar experience and connect with them. There's something healing that happens, and people who have had PTSD from going to war, traditional psychology doesn't really work for them. They have to be in groups with people who have gone through it and understand them. So, there are other people who have gone through the same thing. So connect with them, tell your story. The more you tell your story, the more it comes out. It's not in you anymore. And so get it out. If there's grief, cry, let it out. It's you don't want it in you. If you look into the beliefs of some of the occultists, they don't believe that these things are aliens. They believe that they're demons of some sort. Whether they're right or not, it seems to kind of, the ritualistic way of bringing them seems to work. They tend to respect the name of something that you really believe in. So find your faith and connect with others who have done the same.
How and why is it important for a person who's had an experience like yours, like mine, anything that would fall under this realm of paranormal, find a channel, find a community, find some outlet for this to validate that you're not crazy and to connect with that, but also not to the point to like where you were saying, where you're like, I got sucked into this channel and like it opened a door for me. So I guess it's kind of like a two-part question, like why and how is it important, but how do you do it in a way where like you don't open that door and then like make it worse?
So, I mean, it's important for people to express what they've gone through, because, culture, it really does. I mean, it's great. Culture has given us an easy way of life, and, it's given us food whenever we need it. And there's all the positives to culture, but there's also a prescribed way of being, and you have to fit the mold. And if you don't fit the mold, you can be, classified as any one of the personality disorders. And, there's that world. But then there's also the world of what's really happening. Not the prescribed way of being, but what's really happening. And it's important for you to know that there's a difference between culture and reality. Connecting to other people who have seen that as well, who have seen that there is reality and it is separate from culture. You're not crazy. There are others like you. You've had these experiences and they really did happen. People will tell you, well, where's your evidence? Yeah. Well, maybe when I was strapped to a table, I wasn't able to take a damn picture of these things. So,
it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, oh, well, there was a damn creature in front of me. I wasn't thinking about that. And your mind really doesn't think when you see these things. It doesn't say, I want to take a picture. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But you really should connect with others, because it establishes what you already know, that you are not crazy, that this really happened. It is more real than real. It is spiritual. It is physical. And my hope is that these communities really come together and stop arguing against, hey, it's really this. No, it's really this.
Oh,
well, maybe it's really all of it. Maybe it's really all of it. And while you're at it, go ask the psychonauts. They have some insight too. These things have been hidden, and especially in Western culture, they've been relegated to the realm of secret societies. They have all this information. They know the rituals to call these beings. They know what they are, and they know how to influence reality with their mind. the thing is that there's more of us. There's more of us, and we have that power too. And we just need to connect. We need to let go of control, really, and surrender to that which is greater within us and all around us. And then we have that real power of true manifestation, not new age manifestation, but a manifestation that comes from faith and grace. And that's true power. And it's a power that's based in love, so it's not corruptible. Reach out, find the others. You can reach out to a community, a hypnotherapist. I'm not a big fan of the traditional therapists or psychologists, but, reach out to someone who's going to listen. Now, that's the key. If you know someone's going to help you, are they listening to what you have to say? And 90% of the healing is someone there to hear you out and really, really take into account that you had this experience, and whether they agree with it or not and they think it's real or not, that doesn't matter. It's like, do they care about how you feel about it? And that's where healing is.
That's a great answer, dude. That's probably one of the best answers. You mentioned proof, and this is like one thing that I kind of just like laugh at. And as you know, as anybody who's had an experience, people say, "Where's the proof?" I'm like, well, not only is this something that obviously can't be documented for whatever reason, even if it could, and I stand by this wholeheartedly, that, I don't think for the people who say I need proof to see, I don't think there's any proof you can give them other than a physical experience that's going to make them believe, because, you could show them pictures and videos and they're going to be like, well, you could take the clearest, cinematic still possible, and they're still gonna be like, well, because their complaint is that it's always blurry. But I'm like, if you take it perfectly clear, but then it's too perfect, then it was clearly staged. So it's like, you know what? they're not looking for proof. They're looking for reasons to disbelieve. Honestly, I don't remember the old saying. I can't remember who said it, but you're not going to ever convince somebody who's not wanting to believe. And that's a really vague version of the quote, but I think you might know what I'm getting at. I'd have to try and find it. Why can't we document this stuff? We know in science that for it to be valid, you have to be able to, observe and replicate it in a controlled environment. So why can't you do that with paranormal? I know I've mentioned before that's because it operates outside of our physics, but why can't we? Why are we struggling so much to document, whether it be video, photographic evidence? Why?
There's a whole bunch of things that came to mind that
I know.
I know.
And it's a good question.
Yes, it is. In the realm of like spiritual experience and psychedelics, there's something that happens with people when they experience something. They have this kind of enlightenment, ego death experience, and then they want to get everyone in on it, all their friends. Like, you need to wake up. You need to wake up, like a spiritual Oprah or something. Like,
yeah.
Everyone needs to wake up. And it's a kind of immature way of looking at it in that sense, because I think everyone needs to kind of come to it on their own. You'll never convince someone who is still within a kind of matrix belief.
Yep.
And
that's a good way to put it, man.
It is up to them to come on their own accord when they have the experience, or when they, choose to, because it's in a way kind of cruel to bring someone out of something, because their mind can fracture. Put them on some 5 grams of psilocybin, you can break them if they weren't ready for it, if it wasn't their choice, or if you show them like, hey, I know where the damn aliens are, and you take them to a cave or something.
Yeah,
their mind will shatter, because they're still like, I don't want to know anything outside this world. So there's that, and I think the reason it's hard to document is because, for one, when the person has an experience like that, that's not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about survival. They really go into a kind of hypnotic state. Experiencers have said, I'm either paralyzed or I'm like hypnotized, and or I'm just damn afraid. There's that. And there's the other thing when documentation has happened and people have had implants and that kind of thing. They're just disregarded, or it goes missing, or people go missing. When it is collected, people don't believe it, and I don't think there is anything you can do to convince someone like that. I think it's really not up to us either. It's their journey to do. It does play in a different level. Like, we can't capture something scientifically when we don't know all the rules. There are different rules.
Quote. I love it. Genius answer, man.
The lack of evidence doesn't mean lack of existence, and that's true. We can say that a particular type of whale doesn't exist. We just haven't found it. That doesn't mean it. We don't have samples of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
I mean, that's true. On a final note, you mentioned that the fracture of the mind. I think it's really fascinating, and I just want you to tell me if this is what you think had happened. Back in the 70s, my dad dropped a lot of acid. Him and one of his friends. I'm trying to remember what the situation was. Long story short, they all dropped acid, and I think his friend had gone to a cemetery, or maybe they already at the cemetery. Either way, this friend of his went to a cemetery, dropped acid. Apparently, he said he saw the god, he saw the devil, and he just flipped out. I don't know if it was too much for him. Anyway, he ended up in a mental hospital for the remainder of his life. And so, obviously, as you know, there are some people that take psychedelics and they check out. They never come back around the block again. And my question to you is that fracturing? Like, why does that happen?
You know, I spoke a lot about the psychedelics here, but I don't condone anyone going out and doing them. You know, I recently had someone ask me, and I said, unless you're willing to have everything about you destroyed, then don't do it.
Yeah.
Because they were seeking a kind of enlightenment, and I said that comes at a cost. You know, you're going to get wisdom, but everything you are is going to be shattered. You have to reform yourself. You know, it really does break you apart, and that's what this ego death they talk about. And I don't think that's a really good goal, honestly. Like, you can shatter yourself, the ego comes back. It always does. And if you're up to the task of reforming it, recreating yourself, then that's one thing. But it should be said, because it's not said in these communities. Like, people aren't told, hey, you can completely be changed. So there's positive aspects, there's very negative aspects, but I don't condone them. You know, I don't condone them for the purpose of trying to reach some kind of enlightenment, because in the end, the answer to an enlightenment, you don't get it. You don't get it until you surrender. So the answer to all of it is really kind of a faith of, I surrender and not knowing, and then you get true knowing. But you can do that from the beginning. You can just have faith in the beginning and not have to go down that route. But, you know, as to why certain people have that and some don't, I think it kind of goes to personality. You know, some people need more control. Like, say, someone who's more introverted, they need control. If something is out of their control, there's going to be a lot of anxiety that happens. So the person who's more open, okay, I saw that. That's cool. There's a whale over there, or whatever it is. That's cool. The personality type will determine what happens, and tread carefully with that stuff. And you are opening doorways. Don't let the secular way of viewing life affect you going into the spiritual world.
You're a really intelligent and aware cat, man. You really are. Like, I'm hearing how you're responding and the things you're saying. I'm like, it's an honor to talk to you, man.
Well, thank you. You know, a lot of the struggle I see now is the conscious mind gets in the way of subconscious thought and flow. So especially with people who have trouble speaking in public, it's, you know, when we talk, we're not constantly thinking, oh, what am I going to say next? What am I going to say next?
Right.
This kind of flows from the subconscious mind. But when people get self-conscious, this part of the mind just tries to take control, and it tries to become like the speaker, but it becomes almost like an imposter. Then you become you pretending to be you, and then the flow stops. So when I try to speak, I try to get the conscious mind out of the way, and I go into a little bit of a hypnotic state so that the subconscious contents just flow freely. And, you know, the conscious mind is just kind of there to make sure I don't cuss or anything. But, you know, it's you just have to allow the flow of your true self from within to kind of flow out, and all the stuff that's within you just be. Yeah, you know, well, this can act as a kind of like, okay, the contents flow, and this part is like the secretary. It's like, okay, there's this thought, this part puts it here, puts it there, and kind of organizes. So it's a good thing to organize things with, but to actually speak and think with this, when you're speaking about things of this nature, it doesn't really work that way. So it's good to organize, but let it flow from where it originates. People are looking for any kind of healing as far as anxiety, sleep issues, smoking cessation, or alien abduction regression, past life regression. The website is hypnawolf.com. It's HYPNAWOF. And I also want to mention my friend and colleague Byron Woodman. His site is limitlesshypno.com. He's a great hypnotherapist as well. And I'm going to share some images with you, and it's by my friend Jonah Andre. He's under doll_set on Instagram. He's a beautiful artist. So yeah, those are people that have helped me along my journey. So